In this video, we're explaining everyone's favorite season of Blue Lock in around 20 minutes or less. Okay, so Blue Lock Season 2 begins with only 35 players left out of the 300 who signed up to become the world's best striker. At this point, Igo's job was to create a team out of these remaining players who could defeat Japan's under-20 squad. For context, Japan's U20 squad has professional athletes, academy superstars, and defensive specialists, whereas everyone at Blue Lock were just high school level strikers. On paper, not even Pep Guardiola himself could lead Blue Lock to victory, but Igo believed they could win by building a team around their 6 best players. Those players were Rin Itoshi at number 1, followed by Shidou, Karasu, Otoya, Yukimiya, and Nagi. As you can see, most of the top 6 are guys who we've never seen play before, and that's because Season 1 focused on Isagi, so it's easy to forget there were dozens of other matches happening off screen. Speaking of Isagi, he was disappointed not to make the top 6, but he still had one chance to be part of the team that faces Japan. After all, real football sides need 11 players on the pitch, and so there were plenty of spaces still up for grabs. To fill the remaining spots, Igo devised a system where players like Isagi would get one match to prove themselves. The way it works is that the top 6 were divided into teams, with Rin and Shidou being Team A, Karasu and Otoya being Team B, and Nagi and Yukimiya being Team C. These 3 teams would then play each other several times, but in each game, they'd be joined by a new set of teammates. For example, in the first match, Rin's Team A was joined by Isagi, Hiori and Nanase to form a team of 5 players. These 5 players then faced off against the 5 of Team B, and for all the players not in the top 6, this would be their only match. To make himself stand out, Isagi tried to use his spatial awareness to set up Rin for a goal, but his final pass got blocked by Chigiri. As the ball then flies away seemingly at random, Shidou appears out of nowhere to score a ridiculous back heel shot. For most strikers, this wouldn't even enter their brains to even try it. However, Shidou's talent is that he can score any type of goal when he's around the box. These skills are how he knocked Kunigami out of Blue Lock, but his one weakness is that he usually doesn't do much besides putting the ball in the net. Following this goal, the top 6 dominated the match, with Karasu bullying Isagi to score a goal, and Otoya sneaking past Rin to get one for himself. Rin then strikes back by scoring with a precise shot, and it was at this point that Isagi started to get worried. So far, he'd done absolutely nothing to make himself stand out, and it didn't help that Karasu was actively getting in his way. Luckily, as the game continued, Rin noticed that Isagi was getting destroyed, and he stepped in to deal with Karasu himself. This gave Isagi an opening to steal the ball, and he launched a counterattack with help from Hiori and Nanase. This counterattack ended with him almost scoring a goal, but he missed the ball at the very last second. Isagi's problem, besides being an inch too short, is that he plans everything out in his head before it happens, and that long thought process, it stops him from moving as quickly as the top 6. For that reason, Hiori advises him to think reflexively, which essentially means relying purely on instinct to make quick decisions. In the next play, Isagi tries this reflexive thinking for himself as he sneaks between the top 2 players at Blue Lock to score the winning goal for Team A. His instincts in this moment went beyond the level of Rin and Shidou, with Igo being thoroughly impressed by his awakening. Over the next day, a total of 4 other matches were then played, with Bachira, Ryo, and others making a solid case for why they should face Japan. After analysing the data, Igo showed up to reveal his final squad, and amazingly this was only the 2nd time that he'd met them in person. Considering that everyone here is a striker, Igo's plan was to have a super attacking formation unlike anything seen in Japan. The philosophy was that if their opponents score 5, then Blue Lock will score 6, and Igo selected the personnel to make that happen. In defense, Nico and Ryu would bring intelligence and high physical stats, while Chigiri and Bachira would bring speed and technical skills. In midfield, Karasu would use his strength to keep hold of the ball and look for opportunities to pass it forward. On the wings, Yukimiya would blitz past opponents on the left side of the pitch, while Otoya would glide past them on the right. Up front, Rin Itoshi would be the star striker as expected, supported by Nagi to his left, and importantly, Isagi to his right. Out of every player at Blue Lock, Igo declared that Isagi is the most compatible with Rin, and that Shidou was the least compatible. In an ideal world, Shidou could be a bench player who they could, bring on to replace Rin if he was injured or something. However, that was no longer an option. To understand why, we need to flash back to Season 1, when Sae Itoshi became interested in Blue Lock. As we know, Sae is a genius midfielder who plays in Europe, and is also Rin's older brother. From his perspective, Japanese football is terrible, and so Igo's plan to create a Japanese best striker in the world, it was something he wanted to see. For that reason, he agreed to play against Blue Lock for Japan's U20s in a game to decide the future of Japanese soccer. If Blue Lock could prove themselves by winning, then they would become the new U20 team, but if they lost, then the program would be shut down. The problem for Sae is that after he watched real footage of the current U20s, he realized he didn't want to play with them. In his words, the entire team besides him is especially when it comes to the strikers. This is why Sae tried to pull out of the match, and he was only convinced to stay when Japan offered to add anyone he wants to the U20s. Logically speaking, you'd expect him to pick one of the senior players or maybe even his own flesh and blood, but Sae defied all expectations by choosing Shidou. This is why Shidou was no longer an option for Blue Lock, as he was personally chosen by Rin's older brother. When Rin heard about this, he was immediately triggered, because he and Sae have a weird relationship that we'll explain later on. For now, all we need to know is that this gave Rin extra motivation to destroy his brother on the big stage. Over the next 15 days, the strikers of Blue Lock went through non-stop physical, mental, and tactical training to get them ready to crush the U20s. On top of that, players like Gagamaru, they had to learn a brand new position, because he was selected to be the goalie. This special training continued up until the day of the match, when fans from across Japan gathered at the Blue Lock Stadium. For most fans, the reason they showed up was purely to watch Sae Itoshi, with the only Blue Lock supporters being their own families. Despite the lack of support, the players were still excited for the game, partly thanks to their preparation and also thanks to the time spent developing their egos. As the match then kicks off, Blue Lock instantly surprised the U20s with their Nitro formation. The way it works is that when trying to score a goal, Chigiri and Bachira join the attack while Karasu joins the defense. In that way, Blue Lock can overwhelm their opponents with 6 natural strikers, and the plan starts to work when Bachira skills up this U20 midfielder. Before Japan had any time to adapt, Bachira then crossed the ball into Isagi, who'd made the perfect run into the box. Under normal circumstances, this is when Isagi should have scored a direct shot, but as the ball was in the air, it got intercepted by Oliver Aiku. Aiku is the captain of Japan's U20s and by far their best defender. In the same way that a striker might reflexively score goals, Aiku has the strength and spatial awareness to reflexively prevent goals. Therefore, rather than trying to beat him, Blue Lock's new plan was to avoid Aiku by attacking from the sides. Theoretically, this was a great idea, but the U20 team is built around defense. As a result, they knew how to shut down Otoya and Yukimiya, and in the blink of an eye, Aiku was able to pass the ball to Sae Itoshi. From here, Sae launched a rapid counter-attack, with the other U20s helping him to move the ball up the field. Eventually, this all led to a golden opportunity for Sendou, who's the main striker of the team. Before we continue, Sendou is a player who Sae doesn't respect, which is why he wanted Shidou to be their striker. However, behind the scenes, Aiku convinced Sae to let Sendou start the game because he wanted to see if the U20s could win this match on their own. In the present day, Gagamaru stopped Sendou's shot from going in, with the ball falling to Sae near the edge of the box. Being the genius that he is, the older Itoshi brother smashes it over Gagamaru's head, scoring from an almost impossible angle. This is what the crowd paid to see, and as they were going crazy, Isagi realized that Sae is the true protagonist. Compared to him, everyone at Blue Lock is pretty much a nobody, but before Isagi gets too upset, Rin tells him to lock in and focus on him. As the game restarts, Rin and Isagi begin passing at unpredictable speeds, and the two are able to confuse the U20 midfield. Their strange movements were also enough to bamboozle the U20 defense, giving Rin, Yukimiya, and Otoya their own chances to score. On each occasion though, Aiku and his teammates were able to block it up until the ball fell to Nagi. In a moment of unexplainable genius, Nagi controlled the ball mid-air, flicked it behind himself, and then volleyed it into the top right corner. Symbolically, this wonder goal was more than just an equalizer, it was a statement to the entire country that Blue Lock has produced lethal strikers. Inside the stadium, there were a ton of confused fans, they didn't even know how to react, but eventually, they start cheering for the Blue Lock 11. On the bench, Ego comments how this was only possible thanks to Rin and Isagi linking up. To be specific, Rin's ability to improvise combined with Isagi's potential to understand him, it meant they could disrupt the U20's formation and create chances for any of their strikers to score. Shortly after the game restarts again, Rin calls out his brother for being a dick. Even before the match, Sae was actively ignoring Rin even when he was standing right next to him, and now, all this time into the game, he still hadn't even said hello. Sae responds by destroying him with this skill and declares that Rin will never surpass him if he keeps acting like the younger brother. As Sae then elegantly passes the ball to Sendou, Nico steals it back from the U20 striker. Nico's spatial awareness gave him a full understanding of where the ball would land, and by timing his movements to perfection, he kicked it straight to Karasu. In this team, Karasu's main role is to connect the defense to the attack, and he does this by linking up with Otoya and Chigiri. As the fastest player in Blue Lock, Chigiri surprises the U20s by blitzing past Aiku, taking the ball deep into the opposition half. Through a series of events, the ball then ends up with Rin near the edge of the box as he faces off with Aiku for a 1v1 clash. Based on Aiku's analysis, he noticed that Rin's left foot is weaker than his right, and so he positions himself to stop Rin from curling it in on the right side. Against a normal boring striker, Aiku's position would have forced them to shoot with their left. However, being an egoist, Rin decides to shoot with the outside of his right. Historically, this technique has been used by elite players like Pogba, Modric, and recently Vinny Jr. as well, and it basically allows you to curve the ball around the opposition. For Rin, the spin he put on the ball allowed it to curve past the U20 defense, giving Blue Lock the lead for the first time. As the entire stadium then goes mental, Rin stayed calm and ordered his teammates to focus on Plan B, which is their defensive formation. Under this system, everyone except Nagi drops back to defend for the final 5 minutes of the half. In the end, Plan B does go pretty much how they wanted, as they survive an onslaught from the U20s by the skin of their teeth. This meant that at half time in the game, the Blue Lock 11 were winning by 2-1. Back in the locker room, Sae acknowledges that Blue Lock has potential, although in his words they still have a long way to go. When it comes to the U20s though, they were a different story, because he believed that all of them were worthless, and he gets ready to leave the match at half time. In order to convince Sae to play the rest of the match, Aiku proposed that Shidou comes on for their second half, and luckily for the U20s that was enough. Meanwhile, in the Blue Lock locker room, Ego warned his players not to celebrate too soon, and he challenged each of them to become the main character of the game. In Rin's case, he was already trying to do this, as the match was basically a stepping stone for him to outshine Sae and potentially crush his brother's dreams. To understand why they seemingly hate each other, it's time to quickly explain their full backstory. As young kids, Sae was a footballing prodigy whose mission was to become the world's best striker. When Rin then also showed a natural talent for the game, Sae put the idea in his head that they could become the first and second best strikers on the planet. Following this, the siblings spent their entire childhoods playing together up until Sae got scouted by Royal, aka Real Madrid. Just before he moved to Spain, Sae made Rin promise not to give up on their dream, as he wanted his brother to reach the same level. Rin himself was happy to agree because the reason he plays soccer was for them to spend time together. Unfortunately, 4 years later, Sae returned from Spain looking traumatized, having faced players even more talented than him. This is why he was the one to give up on their dream, as he now wanted to be the best midfielder. Understandably, Rin was pissed off to see his idol giving up, and you can tell Sae was disappointed to have let him down. Therefore, as a consolation, Sae offered Rin one chance to save their dream if he could defeat him in a 1v1 match. Of course, Rin wasn't developed enough to do that yet, and so when he lost, Sae told his brother that he was worthless, had no value, and wasn't needed in his life. Whichever way you look at it, this was incredibly harsh and over the top, but you could argue that Sae only said these things because he wanted Rin to play soccer for himself and find his own ego. Even that isn't really a good excuse, but it's just one way of explaining why he would be so harsh. With that explained, the second half of the match begins with Shidou coming on, and he makes an instant impact by scoring a wonder goal for the U20s. This goal leveled up the score at 2-2 and was only possible because Sae's genius passes combined perfectly with Shidou's unconventional shots. On top of that, Sae was actively giving Shidou advice like some kind of older brother, which did help the striker to get close to his flow state. Previously, Ego explained that flow is when the brain works at its full potential to create miracles on the pitch. In order to reach this state, you have to fully concentrate on a difficult challenge, but it can't be too difficult. It has to be something that's within your possibilities, but not too easy at the same time. It has to be in that sweet spot between super difficult and super easy. So far in this match, no one had achieved it yet, but Shidou sensed that he could feel something about to happen. On one of the next plays, Sae launches a perfect long-range pass and Shidou speeds past the Blue Lock defense to reach it. Before he can make contact though, Gagamaru comes out his box to intercept and heads the ball back down the pitch. This moment is when Shidou gets a burst of inspiration and becomes the first player to enter the flow. As the ball loops over his head, the striker leaps into the air and blasts in an overhead bicycle kick. This goal was inspired by the one that Zlatan scored against England, although I'd imagine Zlatan wasn't this horny while doing it. Anyway, in response to Shidou finding his flow, Isagi demanded that Ego do something to give Blue Lock a chance of fighting back. As the manager, Ego had the power to bring on 3 players from the bench, but at this point, he'd used 2 of his substitutions. The first subs he made was to bring on Ryo and Hiori to replace the exhausted Chigiri and the injured Nico. With just 1 substitution left, the manager decided to take a gamble by bringing Shohei Baro to the field. As we know, Baro has an incredibly selfish playstyle where he refuses to pass the ball and is even willing to tackle his own teammates. For the U20s, a player like this is something they've never seen in their lives, and so the defense initially didn't know how to handle him. After chopping past them, Baro hits the post with a powerful shot, with the ball then rebounding to Yukimiya. At this stage of the match, Yukimiya had now entered his flow state, allowing him to pinpoint the exact angle to score. However, as his spinning gyro shot heads towards the top corner, Aiku blocks it with a flying header. Up until now, the U20 captain had been very rational with his defending, so this risky style of soccer, it was very unexpected. The reason Aiku went for this header is that he had also entered the flow, which in his case, it enables him to see the most dangerous areas of the field. Before we continue, one thing that makes Aiku similar to Sae Itoshi is that they both grew up wanting to be the world's best striker, but eventually settled for trying to be the best in another position. In Oliver's case, he gave up on his dream because Japanese coaches want strikers who care about boring team goals rather than individual flair. By contrast, strikers at Blue Lock are encouraged to be selfish, and Aiku realized that, if Blue Lock had started earlier, then he'd likely be playing for their side. For that reason, he was eager to give this his all because he wanted to test if they were worthy of changing Japanese soccer. As the U20s launch a counter-attack, the Blue Lock 11 enter a new mental state that Isagi described as a trance chain. Essentially, each player is faced with their own individual challenge on the pitch, and by passing that test, it led to the next player overcoming their challenge. This chain kept going from player to player until Nagi sets up Isagi for a direct shot against the U20s. To reach this position, Isagi had to do a ton of mental calculations as he finally gets closer to his flow state. Unexpectedly though, Sae Itoshi pulls up to ruin the moment, throwing the striker off balance in the process. Because he's a genius, Sae knew that Isagi would end up in this spot, but luckily Rin predicted that as well. Knowing that Isagi would arrive here, Rin positioned himself to receive a pass in the U20 box. Therefore, even though Sae had stopped Isagi from shooting, the striker could still poke the ball in Rin's direction. In this scene, the entire Blue Lock 11 was praying for Rin to reach the ball before Aiku, but before we see the conclusion, Baro crashes into the box. Up until now, he'd been stalking Isagi from a distance, waiting for the exact moment that he'd passed to Rin. From Baro's point of view, the two of them are essentially the same level, and he knew that Rin would be able to respond to Isagi's evolution. As a result, Baro positioned himself to steal the ball before it could reach Rin, and he blasted it past the U20 keeper. This monstrous goal tied up the game at 3-3, causing people all across the country to lose their minds. Having tried for so long to get the equalizer, Baro's goal was naturally a huge relief, but all the players knew that a draw wouldn't be enough. With just 15 minutes left, whoever scored next would likely win the game, and after kickoff, both teams had chances to win it. For Blue Lock, Bachira entered the flow and almost scored a brilliant solo goal, but it got cleared off the line by Sendou. For the U20s, Sae tried to set up Shidou but was blocked by Rin, and then tried to set up Aiku, surprisingly, whose shot was also blocked by Rin. At this point, Rin was using all his knowledge of Sae to try and predict where his brother would pass the ball. So far, this new strategy had been working, but it didn't take very long for Sae to notice. In the final 2 minutes of normal time, Sae delivered a corner that he knew Rin couldn't reach, with Shidou jumping forward for a diving header. Thanks to Rin's inner monologue, we know that he accepted defeat in this moment because he knew that Shidou would score, until Isagi showed up to save the day. By combining his reflexes, his vision, and his understanding of Rin, Isagi was able to intercept Sae's pass and launch it to Hiori for a counterattack. Although this should have been a great thing, Rin was furious that Isagi interfered because in his mind, he wanted to face his brother alone. Regardless of whether he won or he lost, he wanted the result of this match to be him versus Sae. And so Isagi intercepting the pass and, changing the fate of the game, doing that annoyed him because he wanted to do this alone. This realization leads to Rin entering his flow state, where his new mission was to win the match single-handedly. What followed this was Rin tackling Hiori, his own teammate, refusing to pass the ball, and then destroying the U20 defense one by one. The way it worked is that he would get his opponent to try and use their unique weapon against him, and then once they actually did it, he'd find the perfect counter to get past them. His freaky looking flow got the ball from his side of the pitch to the U20s, and it culminated in a shot that still didn't go in. According to Sae, who now had possession of the ball, the reason Rin failed is that he's still not playing soccer for himself, which I think is what Sae wanted him to do after he said those things. As we explained, Rin's underlying motivation is to crush his older brother, when a true egoist, they wouldn't think about that. Instead, what they want is to score goals for their own satisfaction. This is why Sae preferred someone like Shidou to his own flesh and blood, because Shidou, he lives for nothing but scoring goals. It's all he's built to do. The two siblings then fight each other for possession, as Rin finally embraces his true ego by letting go of all the baggage he was holding onto. This new mindset gave him an immediate improvement, because in the past, Rin has been constantly skilled up by Sae, like the skill that he does always works, but on this occasion, Rin was able to intercept it, causing the ball to fly away at random over Aiku's head. Luckily, out of everyone on the pitch, Isagi was the one person who believed that Rin could beat Sae, and like a true striker, he positioned himself to take advantage. Just like how Rin used luck when they were in Blue Lock, in this moment Isagi runs into the space behind Aiku and fires in a direct shot to win the match for Blue Lock. Not only was this the most epic possible ending for the match, but this one goal changed their futures in a lot of different ways. For example, their success in this match meant that players and clubs from around the world were now ready to invest in the Blue Lock project. Thanks to this investment, Ego would now be able to begin phase 2 of Blue Lock, which he refers to as the Neo-Egoist League. Secondly, the Blue Lock 11 had earned the right to represent Japan in the upcoming U20 World Cup. In front of the press, Isagi promised to win it for them, which is a nice contrast to episode 1 when he was stood to the side as a loser having to watch Kira's interview. Thirdly, Rin was upset that Isagi was the main character, and this was made even worse by something Sae said to him after the game. According to Sae, Isagi is the striker with the most potential to lead Japan into the future. As you'd expect, Rin took that very personally and made it clear that he and Isagi were now direct rivals. Oh yeah, also it turns out that Kunigami is alive and well. Well actually no, he's alive but I'm not sure if he's well because, look at him. In the final episode of season 2, we see him emerging from this door that says wildcard, but at the moment we have no context on what that is, so we just have to wait for season 3. Anyway people, if you enjoyed this recap, then I'd appreciate if you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, as I plan to do more Blue Lock videos in the near future. Thanks for watching as always, and until the next one, peace out.